Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show, coming on Power Talk. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today, and what an honor it is via the legendary Ned Doheny to bring in an incredible musician, a melodic drummer, somebody who came up at a time when the drums was really still very much an accompanist instrument. Sometimes it wouldn't even be mic'd. You had to figure out a way to create volume through soul and really do a lot of different kinds of things. But most importantly, like my guest, he came up at a time when drummers were allowed to be themselves. It was before the efficiency model. It was before playing straight beats and trying to make the last hit on FM radio. As a result, he's been on so many different albums for all different styles of music because he was allowed to be himself. And I think he realizes today that his legacy and his work will go on long after he's left this planet, which is really the goal of every spiritual healer. Gary Mallaber, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Gary, I wanted you to talk about just the idea of, the bass drum in modern recorded music became very prevalent in the 70s and definitely into the 80s. But for a long time, a lot of the music that I listened to from the 60s and even the late 50s, the bass drum is really not that prevalent. And I kind of just wanted you to talk about how you learned to play time on the top of the kit and use the bass drum for rebound and accent.
Okay. But you realize your question is enormous.
Dude, you just go where go where you want to go.
Okay, but look, do me a favor.
Yeah.
There's a lot of info here, and I've gathered quite a bit of info throughout all these decades of doing this. So if I get carried out there, just throw a flag.
No, I'm going to throw you a buoy. I'm going to throw you a lifeline. Don't worry. Dude, I just want you to have a ball.
Bring me right back in because, I mean, really what you've done is you've launched, me talking about the history of, modern recorded music and its effect on all of us.
And that's what I want. I couldn't ask a better person. So just go where you go. It's a stream of consciousness. Just flow.
Oh my God. I mean, where do we begin? Oh my goodness gracious. Okay. Boy.
I mean, maybe just to make it a little bit. Go ahead. Yeah.
Let me start here. Let me just say, at a very young age, growing up in my hometown up in Buffalo, New York, I mean, let me just say, if it wasn't for that city and what went on during those years and those few decades, none of this probably would have happened. The influence there was so enormous, and the music that bled over was just landed in my lap pretty much on a daily basis. So let's start there. And I mean, I started playing at 5.5 years old, listening to every record I could possibly get my hands on, whether they be, current radio or throwback to mom and dad's time, which was valuable, and the current time. And, you're 7 years old and you're growing up in the beginnings of, what became rock and roll. That is monumental, because I somehow developed a knack to take, and I would, before it was a very popular term, I would reverse engineer every piece of recording I got my hands on. Really, I mean, you know that?
I dig.
45. Yeah, to really go inside, because I've been orchestrally trained since I started at 5.5 years old. So it was all reading and grammar school orchestra, high school orchestra, blah, 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 all the stuff that, we did, all that training. And, you just got to know, all those different schools of music, the stuff that was on the street, the stuff that was in school, the stuff that was, philharmonic and symphonic, but mainly, that world of rock and roll took over. And, you studied every record, that was how it was made. And that development of placement of recording technique and what they did in the studios is that's a big bag of stuff to talk about.
Well, no, I mean, I want to narrow it down to like the idea of like these, because it was such a beautiful, specifically talking about jazz. I mean, the idea that Philly Joe, Papa Joe. I mean, can you talk about the first time, like live, that you saw these guys just? I mean, they were dancing on the kit, man. I mean, it was just, it was and all the great music that you were part of, along with Keltner, John Densmore, Gregorico, Michael Shreve, all you guys, I believe, and you got to speak for yourself, you guys were jazz fanatics, Garibaldi as well. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yes, I mean, that transition, it really started, when you go back to those years, it really started with big band swing.
Sure.
So out of big band swing, and you study that history, and the big bands dissolved because who could afford to take 20 guys on the road?
Exactly.
It became, they came down to trios and quartets, and everything became smaller. And then they came down to jazz trios, jazz quartets, and then what took over, when you're in the middle of that beautiful chaos that was happening, where, what I call, where jazz was meeting the beginnings of rock and roll, and country music was beginning to do something else, that turned into rockabilly. Everything was like moshing everything together. And a lot of people didn't realize that a lot of the players stood their ground and the category of music that they played a lot with the jazzers, because that was a different fold of music. And there I was, watching Coltrane play when I'm 15 years old, and watching, Basie's big band at the Kleinhans Music Hall in Buffalo, New York play when I'm 16 years old, taking every bit of it in. And on the other ear, the radio is going into, we're going into blues out of Chicago. We're going into what turned into R&B, what then turned into rock and roll, and all of a sudden you're hearing this transition and you're going, wait a minute. There's a lot of stuff going on here. All right, let's begin again. Let's try to take it from...
Let's take it from the topic. No, listen, you're doing great. No, talk about personalize it in your own. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, inside of that, fold in the technological advances we were making on top of all of that. Okay, so fold that into everything that was coming at us. From those early '78 records to the '45. To, guys breaking all the recording rules, and all of a sudden you're dealing with what they would call the big beat, and all of a sudden, something's happening here. There's this incredible transition going on. And I started grabbing from every world. So every world became something very special to me. I said, all right, I'm playing a jazz world, I'm playing this world, then we're playing with the band 5-6 nights a week in Buffalo, New York, and we're playing all the blues stuff, all the R&B stuff. I mean, I had the beginnings of, if you watch the difference between the Rolling Stones and what the Rolling Stones went through and what the Beatles went through, you could see every influence that they gathered. Well, I gathered all of that plus more. And that's all where that came from. And I'm dealing with this load of stuff, and I'm going, all right, here we go. I mean, where is this going to all go? And, of course, if we study our history of music and we watch where it went, a few people, we've talked about this. A lot of the drummers and a lot of the guys, we've had discussions of, all right, let's find the beginning seed. Where did it transition? Where did it go? And we melted it down to like if you want to just talk about how rock and roll peeled off of all that stuff, you could bring it down to maybe less than 40 people. Now, that's ridiculous if you really think about it.
That is ridiculous.
But we've done our homework, and if you really think about it, there was about 7, 8, 9 artists that boldly took us to the next step. And it wasn't the transitional records, it was the guys that went and did that. And you go, uh-oh, this is forming a whole nother tributary. Okay, let's take the boat and go down that one. And on we went. And there's so much to talk about, having to do with the how people were playing in different regions, the difference between Chicago and New Orleans, and where this was all going. And it seemed to all be filtering through the gates of rock and roll. It seemed that rock and roll in the beginning days allowed more to happen. This is not a put down to jazz, but jazz required a drummer to do basically one beat: swing, bebop, what they did, and free playing depending on that band. Okay,
that definitely.
You really can't compare the Dave Brubeck Quartet to what John Coltrane was doing with Elvin Jones. That was two different. I saw two different sets of jazz being played. As we go on to the other artists with Miles and everybody else, to me, those were really little varying categories of jazz. They all did something a little bit different. But basically the drums stayed in a swing bebop groove. Okay? Fine. All good. I mean, a little Afro jazz was thrown in here and there, and then along came the Crusaders with Joe Sample and
Les McCann and Eddie Harris, the Jazz Crusade. I did.
There you go.
Yeah.
And some of the jazz people got a little upset with that. They weren't quite happy, and because it was going outside the rhythmic format, and the embellished chords were then becoming a little more constitutional, and they became more song, and I saw a few pivotal records that started to transition over, and then they had to deal with, what was going on in the world of rock and roll, which really allowed everything in it. To me, the gates of rock and roll were, I said, wait a minute, I'm going to go over there now, because it seemed to be everything was far more allowable. The beats were changing. Certainly the recordings were changing. And, all of a sudden you got what we call jump blues, big band, pulsating Little Richard. And I said, wait a minute. Yes, it's doing that, but it's mixed a whole different way. Technologically, we've jumped somewhere else.
Now, this is a very interesting thing. I mean, Gary, I just want to stop you for 1 second, because I've done 2,000 interviews in 10 years, and the first cat I ever interviewed was a mainstay at the Pine Grill with Lloyd Price, and I just got word. I just got word that this titan of music passed away, Pat Martino.
Oh my God! Wait a minute! Whoa! The Pine Grill was my Sunday afternoon.
Well, no, we're going to talk about the Pine, because Pat was a young kid, skinny little Italian kid. And with in Lloyd Price's band, Red Holloway, Slide Hampton, and Pat wasn't sure if he was playing well or not, and they'd all be saying, "Yeah, man, keep going." He was 16, man. He just passed away. Rest in peace, Pat Martino, one of my heroes.
No. Yeah. Oh no, wait.
Yeah.
Here's a parallel story.
Go ahead.
The world of the B3. Now that's a whole nother world. We talk about the B3 Hammond organ. I grew up with that in Buffalo, New York, thank God. I knew who Jimmy Smith was, Donald Bailey, Kenny Burrell. I watched him play at Pine Ends. I watched him play in different clubs. I knew who all the B3 guys were, Jack McDuff, Joe Dukes on drums.
I'm loving this. No, because that's the other thing that I wanted to say. You were talking about the early 60s R&B and rock, but the other thing was that the organ was coming out of the church into the nightclub. So you had this soul sanctified jazz going on. Go ahead, continue.
You had, well, look, when I tell this story to people, how much I have to pull from, they're overwhelmed by it, because I happened to be up there and it was territorial, because it was Philadelphia. It came out of Rochester, with a lot of jazz out of Rochester with the guys. And I said, wow, are we getting something nobody else is getting?
Right.
So when I came out to the West Coast, because of Van Morrison, I realized they didn't have that bucket of stuff that they were hearing like we were. We took it all for granted. We said, yeah, look, I know Jack McDuff and Jimmy McGriff and Jimmy Smith with the trio, and I bowed to Jack McDuff with Red Holloway and Harold Vick, and I was there on the Sunday afternoon.
This is filthy.
Listen to this one. He was there, and I'm friends with Joe Dukes. I'm sitting there. I'm 16 years old, and they're allowing me to be there because they knew who the musicians were, because a lot of us they weren't allowed in that place. And on stage is two guitar players. You're going to love this one. I'm watching him with two guitar players. One happens to be Mr. Pat Martino. The other one happens to be this guy named George Benson.
Oh, I love it.
I was there. I saw that.
Wait. I'm sorry. It was
guitar.
No, because Benson told me in our interview that he showed up at Small's Paradise, and they're like, you got to check out this young guitar player. And actually, at that time, Benson was in New York. He had turned down James Brown's offer to open his shows, and he goes up to Small's Paradise. He sees this frail little Italian kid, nice crop of hair. He's like, what is this kid? What is he going to possibly do? And they were playing some R&B ballad, and all of a sudden, Pat just started to fire away like a machine gun, and George is like, I might need to go back to Pittsburgh, man. If this is I have no chance here. I mean, Pat was on.
Well, look.
Yeah.
Look, I'm telling you, both of them were on the stage at the Pine Grove with Jack McDuff.
That is so freaking beautiful. That is so beautiful.
I am telling you the absolute truth. I was like, what is going on here? And it was with Joe, and because I absorbed the world of B3. So, you know what this relates to?
Go ahead.
Well, everything that goes inside my pocket, everything that I grabbed, and I tore apart the records. I said, oh, I understand why it's doing what it's doing, because this is doing that, and there's two guitar parts, and blah, blah, blah. And it was completely, it became, an architecture of thought and of research. So when it came time for me to do a record called Fly Like an Eagle with Steve Miller, Guess what?
Wow.
I knew what to do.
Wow.
You see how it relates?
Absolutely.
You see how
absolutely.
It carries over? But that happened to all my records. So my world of jazz, when I started working with Van Morrison, and all of a sudden he throws a song at us called Moondance, guess what? We knew what to do. Even though here we are in the end of the Beatles are still around, we're playing rock and roll, we're going to go, is this going to be a rock and roll record or a folk record or what are we doing here? And all of a sudden we made an album called Moondance, and it was one of everything. Who knew?
Well, first of all, I want to stop you right there. Did you make up your own part for that song?
Yes.
You did. Okay. Because you knew you had already had the experience seeing the Dukes and the Duck Baileys and these cats. Because that's the swingingest Vantune ever. I know I'm stating the obvious, but
I'm telling you, when we made these records, okay, I had this bucket to pull anything I needed from my education and from what I was absorbing in those earliest years. I was absorbing. I knew when it was going to be orchestral. I knew when I said, look, we're doing a song and Jeff Labes is going to play the harpsichord. Okay, let's put an English twist on this and go and pull from the Baroque period.
Labes, dude.
What I do.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was able, I had this incredible set of crayons, far better than most other people's, and I wasn't afraid to use them, overlap whatever the category was. It didn't matter. That's how I got all my early work at 17 in New York City, because honestly, to tell you the story, I don't want to make enemies, but honestly, the people that called me in to do this work, they said, look, we need a bigger backbeat and we needed to do this. Can you mix the two things together? Because, it can't just be this one thing. I said, yeah, let's go. And at the same time, these guys from England happened to be doing their homework, and I think we know who they were, and they came along at the right time, and it exploded because the studio became a canvas. All of a sudden, the studio's not this place where you go in and you're like, you sweat bullets. No, the studio became, there's the canvas, pick up the brush, let's paint. That's what it became.
Gary Mallaber, I mean, I just I just wanted to ask you real quick about. Clearly, you could play. Was there just a? When did you decide? I know Keltner. I've done a bunch of interviews with Keltner, and at a certain point, I mean, all he wanted to do was with Albert Stinson was just be like Philly Joe and Paul Chambers. They were just jazz nuts. And then at a certain point, Keltner actually did some recordings with Claire Fisher, and he used to play with John Handy and Bobby Hutcherson and live, and then he had to make a left turn. He had a family, and he had to go directly into the studios. I don't want to jump too far ahead, but
okay.
I just want to know, did you ever make a conscious decision to say,
yes.
Did you ever have a dream of being a full-time jazzer and realize you were going to starve to death?
No.
Okay.
No, Mr. Mallaber did not do that. I took a different road. No, let me tell you
Break
my
it down.
thought,
yeah.
and I hope I don't make enemies here, okay?
Go ahead.
This is absolutely the truth. I did an album called Fresh Feathers with John Clemmer, kind of a jazz.
Whoa. You're on that album, dude?
Yes, I'm on.
Oh, I got to get that. I don't remember you on the. Was Wilton Felder on bass? Who was on bass?
I believe it was Wilton Felder.
Go ahead, continue. You did the Fresh Feathers
album. And then I did another album, another kind of jazz album with Buzzy Featon called Full Moon.
Wait, you're on. Wait, I thought Phil Wilson was the drummer on that. You're on that album?
Well, that was early Full Moon. The last Full Moon that Buzzy Featon did with Freddie Breckmeyer and Brandon Fields and me and
Larson.
Wendy,
yeah,
was called Full Moon, New Full Moon. And it has the five of us. And he said, look, so let me tell you, let me back it up a little bit. And Let me tell you, here was my decision, and it was far different than the other guys. And here I go, okay?
Yep.
I'm going to step in some deep water now. In playing all the stuff that I play, orchestral, reading, I had to read from the age of 5 years old until 9 before they put me on a drum kit.
Right.
That was the rule.
Right.
I had to get through 4 books, 1 a year, or whatever we did. Along with that, I was playing on the pad to the 45 records. I'll tell you that later. But once I was hearing what certain blues, R&B, and early rock and roll was doing, and I realized, I said, here's my thought. Okay, I will share it with you. I'm going to get in trouble. Here we go.
Okay.
I realized that the archway into what we were calling the world of rock and roll was bigger. It was more allowable. I was hearing stuff going on. I was going, wait a minute. Then Hal Blaine came along and did the beat for the Ronettes, and this guy came along and did the beat for that. And I was hearing the beats change up, even doo-wop beats, even ballads, and things were changed. I said, wait a minute, there's much more allowable rhythmic freedom over there.
Absolutely. That's amazingly profound. Go ahead. That's profound.
Well, I know some guys are going to throw something at me because of this.
They're going to be chucking stuff.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Let them chuck.
Yeah.
I already made Moondance. I did what I did. I mean, look.
Yeah.
Here's my thought.
Yeah.
If you're going to play like those guys played with John Coltrane, watching Elvin, watching Richard Davis, watching all of these guys perform. If you don't have 5 guys on that stage that can do that equally, forget it.
You nailed it. Forget it.
Don't fool with it, because that was a time and an era where 5 people met up and it did what it did, and you can't just fool with that one.
I appreciate you, man. You're spot on. I can't agree. I completely agree.
I mean, look.
Otherwise, because really, I mean, it's about it's. I mean, but is it fair to say that you're telling me there was more rhythmic freedom within the rock setting than any free jazz or any jazz setting?
Correct. Here's the reason why. And the reason why, and it could be debated and people could slam me, do whatever they want. Look, You can't mistreat me anymore. I've been doing this since I've been 17. I've been completely ignored, and I'm the guy that's on most of all the radio.
Dude, it's unreal. Every day, Mallaber's being punched into the ears of people all over the world. Yep.
And what I did was I just turned it around, and I just said, okay, here's what I'm going to do with what I've got. Here's what I'm saying to you. I'm the guy who stood there and watched Roland Kirk and Yusef Lateef. They were 6 feet away from me. I know my jazz guys. Ahmad Jamal. I know all of them. I've got the records. I've got most, and I've kept most of the Blue Note portfolio. I've got them all. At a certain point, I said, okay, here's what I'm coming up with. Most of the linear stuff, the line, the thread through all of this music is basically, once again, a ding-tick-a-ding-tick-a-ding-tick, a jazz bebop pulse. And then I said to myself, okay, I'm going somewhere else.
Right.
What will allow me to go somewhere else instead of just having to do that 98% of the night? Why do I have to do that? There was a rebel in me a little bit, and am I really going to be working against the jazz world, which is put on a pedestal? And I'm going, yes, I know how proficient you have to be on your instrument. I know that. And I know you can embellish those chords to the point where nobody even knows what key you're in anymore. I mean, Giant Steps is cycle of fifths, and it changes key 3 times. I know what it does. Okay, fine. But Be My Baby by the Ronettes and a beat that Hal Blaine made up means as much to me as that. It drives home something different. So where do I want to go? I want to go where I can sew and manufacture something completely free.
I'd love that you use you're in the bucolic town of Buffalo and you're talking about manufacturing. It's just perfect. Go ahead.
And it's true.
Yeah, I know.
And so I realized, I said, look, I better back out of here. I got to back the car out of the garage really quietly and just go right through the wall and just come out of that garage and go somewhere else, because I'm going to explore everything I'm hearing. And I am not going to get stuck in one spot. And I am not going to put it up on a pedestal. Now, I know that's not going to go over. So I just shut my mouth and moved without saying a word. I just said, no, I like over here. I'm going to go over there. Look, I mean, let's jump into something.
Yeah.
Look, Talking Heads came along. David Byrne. Once in a lifetime. You go, check that rhythm pattern out.
Dig.
Oh, God, that's pretty freaking cool what they did, right?
Right.
Go check it out. Just go listen to it. And you go, okay, that's what I'm talking about. Look what I did when I invented Swingtown, which, by the way, was a drum cadence I wrote at the University of Buffalo, and I wanted to play, but they wouldn't allow me to. I mean, look at the stuff that I've woven into these songs that I pulled from something else. And all I'm saying is, like, I pulled it in a different world that wasn't restricted to one drum pulse. Now, within the world of jazz, which we think of as completely free, no, not for the drummer. Yes, you can play, you can improvise, you can go off and go all over, but you come back to that one pulse. You come back to a bebop, dotted eighth and 16th. You come back to that pulse. That ride cymbal pulse is bebop, is swing, and that's what you come back to. And I'm saying, I want to go somewhere else. Along comes Ringo, and they put together whatever they did with the Beatles in there, and you go, okay, now I know I've got to go there. I've got to go there.
Wow. You were already doing. Wow, this isn't. So the British invasion. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, look. My thinking was somewhat dangerous, but I'm not putting anything down at all. I'm just saying I heard restriction. So I went where there wasn't. And that's not putting an idiom of music down. I wouldn't dare do that. I mean, go listen to Count Basie and the big band, which you can't even hear anymore because who can afford to have a big band today? Besides that, at a certain age, I realized, let's see, okay, how many big bands are there in the country? We're lucky if there's 50, one for each state. How many rock bands are there in the country? Probably 50,000. I'm going there. I might have a better chance.
I love. It's incredible. Did you? I mean, were you hip to the early '60s, before the payola scandal, the Hank Ballard and the Midnighters, Dyke and the Blazers? People think funk started on the West Coast with Sly Stone. It was Johnny Talbot. There's always somebody.
Oh my God!
No.
Yeah, I'm not. These arguments of the origin of these categories of music. Let me say something to you.
Go ahead.
This is all highly debatable stuff. Even the beginnings of rock and roll is that you could say, if you really want to draw it, you could say, well, it really started after World War II, because the big bands started doing jump blues, and we know that for a fact. Red Prysock, Arthur Prysock, they started doing jump blues. I mean,
I love
there
this.
was a
Yeah,
very
I dig.
version of rock around the clock, and rock and roll became sexually suggestive, and then all of a sudden it was like, yeah, that coined the phrase, but it was doing it. It was allowing everything else to happen. I just saw it as just complete freedom. The chords could do what they wanted to. The song could live in a different framework, whether you thought, for a while there, they were trapped in C, A minor, F, and G. We know that. And then we came out of it. Now, here we are 70 years down the road, and, you've got bands like Tool playing stuff that might far outweigh anything that happened in the 50s.
Okay, but I want to ask you something. This is just and because you've been delivering a huge amount of information and it's spot on. But explain now again. You're the first cat that. Well, you've articulated it so well that you jumped into a scene that allowed you more freedom. How do you account, Gary, for the fact that? Again, we're going back to jazz to a degree, but you have your Blue Note records. You put on an album. I can tell if it's Mickey Roker, Pete LaRocca, Max Roach, David Garibaldi. Listen, if somebody went up to David Garibaldi at a nightclub and said, "Hey man, you sounded great. You sounded just like Sam Lay," he'd want to slit his wrists. There was an individual sound on the kit, and I'm just saying. Today, I'm 43 years old. I'm just saying, my generation and younger, I cannot tell the difference. I'm talking about instrumentalists. I can't hear the difference between people, and I'm just trying to say, it's another massive question, but were you, no matter what genre, were you an individualist? And how have we gotten to this point when I can't tell who anybody is anymore?
Well, okay, all right, let's just take that,
yep.
Okay? We're talking about 75 years, 80 years of what's happened here, technically.
Yeah.
Technology-wise, musical-wise, and you're talking, this is a lot of info, pal. This is like the Encyclopedia Americana and Britannica.
I'm on a holy mission. I'm on a holy mission for digging as deep as possible.
But this this is like quantum physics. You're talking about parts of atoms colliding into each other, completely destroying one another and creating something new.
That's exactly
This is exactly what's happened.
Right.
This is exactly what's happened. But I will admit, I really never wanted to be a jazz drummer. And I knew the difference between all the jazz. Look, I met Joe Morello. I met the original Dave Brubeck Quartet with Paul Desmond.
Oh my God, Senator Eugene Wright, unreal.
And when they made Take Five, God, think about this. Take Five in 1961, you could check it out and look it up if you want, was the #1 single on the pop charts. Now, what the hell was that? You realize? I'm telling you a fact. That happened. That's how popular that song became, and it was in 5/4.
Right.
Now, do me a favor. Take that one apart and take it apart and find out the lines of embarkation. What the hell was that all about? Where did that come from? So, how many jazz tunes get to be number one on a pop chart?
Number one on a pop chart, yeah.
Which was called Moondance.
Oh, my God.
Guess what? The last bebop jazz record that was popular, I'm talking popular, was Moondance. We made that, and it was made in the December of 1969. 1970 it was launched, and Warner Brothers didn't even know what they had.
Well, okay, but let me just stop. The Take 5, I mean, jazz was still at the tail end of being popular music. That doesn't shock me, actually. Jazz was still popular American music at that time.
Of course, absolutely, of course. But at the same time, if you compare those notes, at the same time, jazz was doing what it was doing. A guy named Earl Palmer happened to be playing for a guy named Fats Domino and Little Richard, and guess what? The train was going on another track.
That's right.
Father of rock and roll drumming, in my book, was Earl.
Listen, and those guys all, I mean, that's the other thing that we really need to vet. I mean, there's so much, but Cannonball, Train, Earl Palmer, Toussaint, Sonny Rollins, Charlie Neville, all these guys walked the bar before they played bebop. They were honking and walking the bar. There was an R&B and a blues component to it, which led into that. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't. They didn't go to the sophistication and wonkish stuff first. They were walking the bar, and then they fused it with bebop. But anyway, the thing is,
well,
go ahead. Yeah,
I found that fight to be going on. It wore me out. That look, I'm going to say something here. I might get in some serious trouble, but
it's the truth. It's your truth, man.
Well, some jazz and some of that stuff got. Let me choose my words kindly here. It got a bit uppity. It got a little snooty.
Totally.
Rock and roll didn't do that.
Yeah, you're right.
It didn't do that.
Yeah, you're right.
It did not do that. And I said, all right, I understood what Joe Morello did over here. I understood what Elvin Jones was doing over there. Did I love it? Yeah. Could I do that? Well, probably, but who's surrounding Elvin Jones? I understood if you don't have that lineup, you can't run the ball. And I've watched a lot of people try to do that, and I go, you don't quite have the same mechanism that fell together with those people. You just didn't have it. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's the way I see it.
Well, I don't think it. Well, first of all, I mean, I mean, people that are trying to recreate that, they're going to come up short no matter what. But I mean, like in Raven, in these early bands you were in, to me, it's about, forget about playing like that, but it's about playing in the spirit of that, right? It's about playing with urgency, and in that spirit, you're not trying to comp it. But to me, it's like,
absolutely.
That's what it's about.
Yes, absolutely. Look, at a certain age, I figured it out, and I went with it. As bold as it was, I said, you know what? Look, there's drum celebrity, there's this, there's that, there's like, okay, all right. What am I doing with this? I said, you know what? I want to be around people that are going to create something that I could apply my drumming to that will propel it.
Exactly.
Whatever that may be. I don't care about being the greatest jazz drummer in the world. It's not going to happen. You're only the greatest jazz drummer in the world if everyone else surrounding you is that great. Sorry, but that's kind of the way it goes. And if you don't have that between the players, that sophistication of playing, I'm not sure that's going to propel itself the same way.
This is so invigorating. I mean, were you now in Buffalo? I interviewed Don Menza. He used to go to the Black Musicians Union when it was segregated, and Wade Legge was there. There'd be jam sessions. Were you going? I mean, were you part of the union when it was segregated still?
No. I was younger than them. I'm younger than those guys.
You are a little bit, yeah.
There's a trumpet player back there named Sammy Noto.
I'm still trying to get him on the program. He's hiding from. I still want to get him on the program.
Sammy Noto,
Xanadu,
Larry Cavelli, and
God.
Sal Nistico was from, I think, Syracuse.
Yep, that's right.
And all those guys, and Menza, they were all taught by a guy named John Sadola. John Sadola music. John taught those guys saxophone and the old world way, and that's why they were so good.
Sadola, man. What's the old world way?
Sadola.
Come back to Sorrento? What is it?
Sadola. Well, if you played it wrong, you'd hit your hands with a ruler. No,
I say you get consequences. I get it, yeah.
Do it the fucking right way. If you're not going to do it the right way, get off the seat. I mean, you can't fool with that one. No. That one's like, and you're talking about today's music. You're not even hearing people play anymore.
You're nailed exactly, dude. It's all that, and that's. Explain to me the technology that was going. You're blowing my mind because I was all about dropping a mic, maybe one overhead mic and a left. What was the technology renaissance in the mid '60s that you're talking about? Excuse my naivety.
Well, look. If we want to start talking about the technology and recording techniques, that's going to have to be another program.
No, this is only set one. I'm just, you know what it is? I'm trying to get the idea of like, was it, Les Paul multi-track? Like, what are you referring to when you say, because when I think of technology.
Okay, well, quickly, if you go back and you look at the technology that we had at our beck and call, if you go back and you really study the history of recording, you're going to be shocked. I mean, the Beatles weren't even recording stereo.
Right.
Until 1968. They were recording mono. And their early recordings were fourth generation recordings. You know what I mean by fourth generation? By fourth generation, I mean you record on a piece of tape once, then you throw it to another machine, and while it's going over, you do it again.
Right.
Then you throw it back, and then you throw it back. That's 4 generations. That degrades the sound.
Absolutely.
Today we have a computer that reads ones and zeros, and that won't happen.
But Gary, like what I'm getting at is that you actually fine. However you recorded, the threshold. What makes me sad, and one reason I do my show, is because you can have stars propped up through the technology that cannot perform to save their lives. And my daughters and future generations are thinking that these are authentically good musicians. Some of them are, but back then, there was a certain threshold you had to cut in order to get above.
Well, you are correct. That is true. And it's being shrouded in the technology.
Right.
We don't know anymore who's doing what. A lot of stuff is sampled and repeated and, regurgitated. And you hear stuff and I go, oh, I know they didn't play that, because the sonic on the drum is the same sound pressure for every measure. It's very easy to detect. You go, now, wait a minute. And you can surgically alter anything. This is dangerous. It's like genetic engineering for a human. I mean, you could surgically alter anything you're hearing, and they do. You couldn't. All you could do back then, when you cut off your technology ear, was to edit. You could go from take to take and edit. You couldn't get inside there and do much else. Totally different now. You're talking about we can Frankenstein anything. I watch it happen.
I want to read you this quote from, I don't know if you've ever hung with the great drummer Harold Jones, Tony Bennett's drummer, and Basie's drummer too.
I have not. There's a cutoff point to some of the guys that I have met, and I'll tell you about that later.
Yeah, I'm going to read this to you because you've been in the studio a lot, and I want you to reflect on it on your own. I want you to personalize it. This is what Harold told me in our second interview. He said, Well, first of all, he did an interview. He did an album with Oscar Peterson where they basically all hit live in the room, and they'd have a mic overhead, and that was it. And he goes, when I go in the studio, they take the ring out of my cymbal so that it sounded good over the wire, and they could program whatever ring they wanted. They almost took the artistic part right out of our hands. It was actually our sound. Now, this is the part. This is what I want you to talk about. In my career, and this is a guy who recorded with Ella Fitzgerald, Basie, all these guys. In my career, I've only worked with about 4 engineers where I heard the drums sound like I thought they sounded. When I hear recordings back, a lot of times it doesn't sound like me, or the sound that I heard on the drums, the toms, the snare, the cymbal don't sound like what I think they sound like. Can you relate to that in your career?
Sure, but nobody pulled it on me because I take them outside and with them. No, I'm serious. Nobody would pull that.
That's what I'm saying. I'm surprised that he would allow that to. That's very anyway. So you.
No, whatever was allowed and what they went with, that's when things get extreme. I mean, look. I said what I just said, just in somewhat kidding, but no. I mean, I know that's sampling, and that's letting people, alter your sounds. That went on. Now, they can add to your sound, and in some cases, that might make a better recording for whatever the nature of the song is. And some of that has happened, but not in the great records that I've made with all these 5, 6. I've been recording since I've been 17. So you're talking, my God, I'm going on probably somewhere between 700 and 900 albums of stuff, and I don't even mention the ones that I don't even mention.
Well, no, I want to talk about Fresh Feathers, man. You went to L.A. for that, or
no,
Chicago?
I was living in L.A. already.
You were?
I was already here. No. Really quick.
Yeah.
Buffalo, New York City for my earliest recordings, then back and forth, then Woodstock with Van Morrison, New York, then out to San Francisco with Van Morrison, then recording up there. Then all of a sudden, L.A. got a hold of me, and I did all my stuff. I've been out here in L.A. I'm in Thousand Oaks. I've been out here in L.A. since that period of time. That period of time, for me to talk about that stuff, you'd have to, book 5 shows if you want me to talk.
Okay, but
because one of the stories interlocks to the next story, to the next movement of the musicality. So one thing would bounce off of the next thing and then bounce off of the next thing. And for instance, I tell people, well, look, Moondance and the early recordings with Van Morrison, those are Manhattan records. That was 46th Street, A&R Studio.
Wow.
Fly Like an Eagle, Book of Dreams, all the 15 albums I did with Steve Miller Band, that's San Francisco. And a little bit at the Tower, in Capitol Tower in L.A. I did the Eddie Money stuff. That's Record Plant, Los Angeles, blah, 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 back and forth. Back and forth between studios and wherever the locales. I did the Chicago Blues reunion for Marshall Chess, Leonard Chess's son, and we did that in Chicago. And so my point is, things move around, and things become part of that location that you take up at the time, and it reflects the location.
Okay, so let's because we're not gonna go. We're gonna go through. We're not gonna have to do 5 segments in 20 minutes. I just want to.
No.
I wanted to ask you about radio registry. Let's just start in Manhattan. 17 years old. Were you doing a lot of jingle work? How did you actually get into the studios?
Exactly. A really wonderful writer and commercial writer lived in my hometown. His name is David Lucas. And David knew me being with a great band, Stan Celeste, Stan and the Ravens. That's quite a weave of a story, really quickly.
Go ahead.
Stan Celeste, this great piano player, was the original player with Ronnie Hawkins and the Hawks before Richard Manuel was in the band.
Yeah, totally, dude. Totally. I know. I interviewed the Hawk. Yeah, yeah.
Listen, we're all connected. Everybody's connected. Stan came back to Buffalo. He put together Stan and the Ravens. When we started playing, and I'm 16 years old, working in the clubs, way underage. They want to throw me out and arrest me, and blah, blah, blah. David Lucas, out of Buffalo, knew he worked with Don Elliott, the jazz.
Oh, my God. He had a great studio. Yeah, yeah.
They worked together. They wrote commercials, and he said, Gary, I want you to come into New York City. Between you and me, I'm going to use the words, came out of David's mouth. He goes, I need some big beat. I can't get what I need for these next set of commercials for all the products I'm doing for Coke and Squirt and Yardley products from England and all this stuff. He goes, I need you to play what you play, the way you play.
Wow.
Basically, I need that big beat from you. I can't use the bebop jazz stuff on this stuff. I got to have something else. So he would fly me in. I'm still in high school. He would fly me in on certain weekends, and all of a sudden, my first bass player was the incredible Mr. Chuck Rainey.
Oh, my, a dear friend. I can't even, but wait a minute. Are you kidding? Wait, was Everett Barksdale in the studio? This is unbelievable.
I didn't know it was Chuck Rainey till about 2 years later. I was so scared when I was playing, and everything came out great, but I told David, I said, wow, everything at once. He goes, oh, yeah. They were the only studio in New York that had an 8-track machine.
Right.
Before that, they didn't have them. They didn't exist. The technology wasn't there yet. You get it?
First of all, you were clearly ensconced. You were already part of the union, even though you were in high school. And then they would fly, and they would fly you in.
He'd fly me in on the weekend. We'd record Saturday and Sunday. I'd fly back and be there for high school on Monday morning. But I mean,
that is insane. That is the greatest story of all.
Chronologically,
yeah.
Jay, take this chronologically. Yeah. Think about the Beatles. Let's go to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go. And their early records. I mean, the technology was archaic. We're still dealing with analog vacuum tube technology, which was beautiful, absolutely gorgeous, and we're still dealing with. They weren't multi-tracking yet. They were throwing back and forth, but, that didn't come out till years later. They were just I heard those masters because Steve Miller Band, when we did the Abracadabra record, which I produced with Steve, we went over there and we did a massive tour in Europe. And Ken Townsend, the guys over at Abbey Road, brought us in and started playing some of the masters. You're talking about some raw talent. I heard those masters. You're going, holy Christ. That was who they were. There was no trickery going on here.
That's what I'm talking. You're nailing it. There were no smoke and mirrors. Real raw talent.
There was no auto-tuning. There was no nothing. I'm just saying, I heard that stuff and I said, oh my God, I'm actually listening to the masters. Jesus God. What they captured. And then, where did they take it? That's the important thing. Right. Look, here, let me throw in a little slice. I've got so much stuff for you.
Oh, yeah, I love
it. I did 5 of the first 5 albums of Eddie Money, okay?
Yeah.
And he was managed by Bill Graham, and Bill Graham said, look, I want you and Lonnie Turner from the Steve Miller Band because you guys we were knocking out hit after hit after hit. He goes, I want you to launch my boy. I said, yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Graham. So CBS and Bruce Botnick, who produced The Doors.
Oh, I love a dear friend. I've interviewed Bruce. I love that cat.
Bruce was one of the best producers in the world
ever,
and he just so happened to have this engineer guy, who happened to be the engineer for Zeppelin, and his name was Andy Johns.
Oh.
He was the brother of Glenn Johns, right, the other pretty big producer from England. And Andy lived here in America, and I became Andy's go-to drummer. And Andy was there, album 1, Eddie Money, in the studio. All of a sudden, I'm realizing, oh, my God, this is another Moon Dance. This is going to be another Fly Like an Eagle. We knocked out Baby Hold On to Me and 2 Tickets to Paradise in the first week.
Oh, my God.
Knocked them out.
Oh, my.
Just knocked them out. And it was Andy's engineering and Bruce's beautiful production in calling the shots. And I looked at Andy and I said, God, that sounds great, man. I said, do you mind if I look over your shoulder a little bit and hang out? And he goes, okay, man, go ahead, mate. You could just sit right there. and I got my lessons.
Just for the record, I mean, I just don't want to jump into, I mean, I'm just curious about, outside of the Jingles, what was the first record date in New York that you played on? Were there any baffles in any of the stuff that you just, Eddie Money, Steve Miller, any baffles at all, any or straight hitting in the same room at the same time?
Okay, let me straighten that out for you. My first real other sessions that I did, when my band, out of my hometown, we put together the band Raven because of Stan Celeste, and that's another hour story.
Oh, yeah,
okay?
definitely.
I'm going to cut forward. Let me cut forward, okay?
Yep.
I'm editing. I'm self-editing. I got more of my information.
Dude, we're going to do about 9 installments, but just go ahead. This is great.
Let me tell you one more truth. I learned more in working with the film world out here than working in the music world. So everything I do now and I've done in the past came through the film world. Moving the story, editing, doing quick move, boom, boom, this is working, that's not working, cut, do. That is how I got my brain put together because I wanted it put together that way. So if we're talking about, we're going to talk about first recordings, my band Raven came out of Buffalo, New York. We took New York by storm. We were playing. Jimi Hendrix used to sit in with us at 2 o'clock in the morning. True story. Jimi Hendrix and Eddie Kramer told the people at CBS Records, you better listen to this band, blah, blah, blah. Before I knew it, we had a 3-album deal. Now, that's a 2-hour story. I just gave it to you in 20 seconds.
Well, no, did Jimmy get hip to you in the circuit up in upstate New York, or you were down at Cafe Go-Go?
We became the house band playing at the Scene Club in New York City on 46th Street.
Wait, what was the club's name?
The Scene.
The Scene. I dig. Oh, you became the house band at the Scene.
Wow. The English bands used to come into New York, and that's where they used to hang out. It was a downstairs club like the Cavern Club.
Wow.
And we would play there, and they came in to listen to us. And we were playing some really good stuff. They knew there was something going on here, and Jimmy and Eddie heard it, and they said, and our manager at the time, they said, would you listen to their tapes? And they said, absolutely. So it happens that my bass player, Tommy Calandra, had a original 1957 bass, Fender bass, made by the guys in Fullerton, and Jimmy wanted to buy it from him, but Tommy wouldn't sell it, so he would sit in on the bass at 2 o'clock in the morning.
And again, that was you guys were playing. You were going across. It was a smorgasbord of R&B.
Yes.
Everything.
All the bands were in there. There was a band in there hanging out called CTA. That was Chicago.
Oh yeah.
The McCoys were in there. They were there.
Oh my God.
Jimi Hendrix and Noel Redding was there. Mitch Mitchell was there. Everybody that was playing and doing the scene, they were there. Okay. So before you knew it, yes, we made that. That was my first real band recordings.
So I just want to be clear. The first time, outside of the Squirt commercials and the big beat,
stuff,
the jingle stuff, the first actual album was, you were not called in as an accompanist. That was your band.
That was Raven.
Unbelievable.
That was the band Raven. Yeah. And really, if I could sum up Raven for you without going on with a lot of unnecessary information here. Really, Raven, had we had the right producer, one guy literally would have to just tell the 5 of us, here's what I want you guys to do. I want you to go into that room and not come out until you could write something as well as you can play. Until you have that, don't come out of the room. Had we had that guy, it would have been a different story. We needed somebody to kick our ass.
Even though Hendrix thought you were on fire, you still
even though we thought we were something, even though all of that, we needed the guy to say, all right, write something as good as you can play. Go ahead and do that, and then show me. Had we had that guy, it would have been a different outcome. We did not, and that was it. We tried, and boom. And right after that, within a year, I was playing for Van Morrison.
Okay, we just crossed the 60-minute mark. Can we do set 2 tomorrow, 1 p.m., just another hour?
You can call me earlier.
I don't get. I got work. Yeah, I got work till 12:30, but I can get over here a little before 1 o'clock. Does that work?
All right, shoot a call. Let's see what happens. It should. Yes.
It's an honor, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you for blowing my mind, man. Thank you, brother.
Listen. Here, I got it. Just go to GaryMallaber.com, unless you already have, and then you can email me too if you need to. But that's fine. Call me again. I'm right here.
All right, bro. Be cool.
Okay.
Later, man.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Mind-blowing discussion with Gary Mallaber. Looking forward to doing set 2 with him tomorrow. And we got many more to do. Heavy heart today on the Jake Feinberg Show with the loss of a legend, Pat Martino. The Pine Grill lives on. Rest in peace. That's it. We'll see you later.